So again, for those of you who joined late, we're going to divide this into 3 blocks. First block is to actually have some mentoring up on display, and we have we will start out with one question that we talked about within the panel. It was a question that Jim had asking about junior faculty's perspectives, but then what we thought we'd do for the next 20 minutes or so is open it up for but it could be the more senior folks in the room who would like to ask the more junior folks in the room to share insights on something that is inexplicable, or you could use insight on. But the conversation may evolve from there, which is fine. And then the second block, we'll talk about how do we initiate a reverse mentoring process. So Jim, you had a fascinating question in a prep session we had for this. So we thought if you wanted to start us off by asking, and Brittany and Jen, if you guys want to take the first responses and then we'll open it up and go from there, that would be great. And I'll do a combination of moderating and getting out of the way.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you to moderate because I want to be sure I'm asking the right question. Is it the one about getting students to follow directions, or was it something more?
Short time horizons.
Short time, certainly. Yeah, especially as you get older, you tend to have a longer time horizon on things. And I've noticed that students don't seem to have a very long time horizon. I don't know if it's any shorter than it used to be or longer than it used to be, but I've noticed trying to get them to think through what's going to happen over the semester is very difficult. And I was wondering if anybody had any insights as to how to build that sense of what we're doing in a class is really a project. It's a process that starts and ends, but there's something going on in between that hopefully is cumulative.
Yeah, so I'll take a first stab at that. And I'm going to bring in some insights of when we had talked about this earlier. We basically came to the conclusion, and it's kind of funny that you asked if you were asking the right question at first, because we decided it wasn't the right question. And really, and we came to that conclusion because the question is more related to the why. Why are the students there? So they're not just seeing it as a student or as an assignment with chunks that they need to complete over time. What they care about is relevance, and especially this generation more than ever. They're looking at, a lot of them are financing their own degree. They've seen siblings and parents, go before them that have gotten great degrees, but have maybe struggled to get sufficient employment. They might be underemployed or not employed. So the students in your classroom right now are very value oriented. So if you give them an assignment, they want to know, beyond, how do I get an A on this, or how do I pass this assignment? They want to know, how is this going to relate? How is this going to affect me getting a job, getting to the career that I want, the point that I want after graduation, or even while they're still in school? How does this help me get an internship? How does this help me connect with somebody in the business community? How does this help me gain leadership experience?
Jim, I'll also add on to Brittany's comments. When we were talking about this earlier, we sort of had this aha moment that the reality is that firsthand, so many students that I work with tend to be so focused on their future, as if the 4 years of college are I just got to get through it.
Yes.
Because I'm really focused on where I want to be, what do I want to do, and again, to Brittany's point, how am I going to get there? And oftentimes when I'm meeting with my juniors and seniors in particular, and in my leadership courses where they do a lot of reflection, they're spending time thinking about how they've rushed through their college experience without really stopping and smelling the roses, right? They sort of have these regrets that they've just sort of checked these check boxes along the way and haven't really enjoyed everything. And I think they're trying to make up for that to some extent in later on in their college experience. So again, a bit with what Brittany said, I think where we can be relevant with our respective assignments and help students to sort of find be able to help them live in the moment and find how what they're doing is relevant and a piece of the puzzle, helping them to get to their future goals. I think they would embrace that a bit more than perhaps saying, okay, this is just an assignment for a class. It's just one of the required classes I have to take, which again can be a simple discussion at the beginning of the assignment about why we're doing it, how it fits in with not only the course, but with what you know as so many of your students in terms of their career plans.
Other thoughts from other people?
Well, Jim, don't you think your own time horizons have gotten shorter and chunkier?
Possibly. Some of them. Some of
Yeah,
them certainly have.
I just think the junior folks are reacting to the things that we're making them react to. I mean, there's so little, I think, in our industry, there's so little they can count on. You know, tenure is dying and institutional support is disappearing,
Mhm.
and institutions are so resource scarce that at least, certainly this is true of my institution, it's also true of institutions of people I work with pretty frequently, that there is this increasing requirement to have your time and energy spent for the benefit of the institution rather than the things that we do externally, like
Mhm.
societies and professional service and reviewing and journal editing. And it's viewed as disloyal. And so I just think so many things have changed and so many things are foundationally different each year. I don't know how they could not have that kind of a time horizon.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I remember when I was an undergraduate, I would mark off every week as so much of the semester, what percent of the semester was now completed. That was sort of my guide point. So.
So let me follow up too by saying, Kathy, I don't know if you intended this or not, but it almost sounded like you were also, Kathy, saying not only do our students have shorter time horizons, it feels like, but the junior faculty also,
Mhm.
it seems like junior faculty are thinking in shorter chunks.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about students.
Yeah.
I was talking about junior faculty, like people entering our professional. Yeah, I
Mhm.
don't know how else you can think about it. I don't
So
know why else you would think differently about it.
So Brittany and Jen, I wonder if either of you guys want to respond. And then what we'd really love is to have the participants who were not officially panelists engaging in this. So if you want to either share your response to the question or add on to the question, that would be great. Jake, I see you raised your hand. So why don't we start with you, Jake, and then Brittany and Jen, I'll come to you guys.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So some of the things that Jennifer and Brittany were saying kind of rang a bell with me, if you will, but I like to kind of take it back to Stephen Covey, begin with an end in mind. And I always remind my students of that. So I actually volunteer. I think it was Kathy that said she doesn't like to do the intro stuff, but I like to volunteer for our first year experience class every fall. I will teach one class, one section of that. And I straight up ask the students, why are you here? Because if you don't know why you're here, then you shouldn't be here. If you're here because your friends go to college, if you're here because somebody else is paying for it, if you're here because you have to go to college, none of those things are good reasons. If you don't know your motivation, and I think that's something that Jennifer and Brittany were talking about, like we want to know why this helps us, but if you don't know what your end goal is, then nobody can tell you why this helps you. Right? So they are shorter term oriented, I think, but helping them remember the end goal or helping them figure out what that end goal is important. Now with their short term mind frame, you might have to remind them every semester of what that end goal is, but they need to know what their end goal is in order to understand why any of this stuff even matters in the first place. It doesn't matter if it matters or not if you don't know what your end goal is.
I'll put a link to a video in the chat, Jake. I do something very similar on the first day of class in my intro to management class. So I'll do my introduction stuff and kind of sell them on why this is important and blah, 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 right? And then I sort of say at the very end of the semester, we all have one common resource. We're going to learn about the resources that managers have. One of those resources is time. How will you make the most of your time? And this video clip goes on to really talk about your why, and what is your why, and what legacy will you leave behind, and what's going to get you up in the morning, and get you going, and I know what's your passion. And it's these really big questions, but I have students come up to me afterwards and say just how inspiring that message was. And in many situations, they haven't really given thought to that question. And so I'll put it in the chat if I can find it quickly. It might be something that maybe you reference or would like to use too.
Jen or Brittany or anyone else in the audience who relates to being on the junior side of things, do you want to say anything about having a shorter time horizon as a young faculty member? Chantal?
All on people, or do we just unmute?
I don't know. Whatever is comfortable for you.
Sure. I guess, I mean, as a younger faculty member, maybe not necessarily less senior, we've just grown up in a time where nothing was, actually given to us in the way that we were promised it would be, right? A lot of us graduated in the middle of or shortly after the last recession. We were told if we went to college that we would get a good job, and then we graduated from college and there were no jobs, period, yet alone good jobs. And then we went, they said, go get graduate education. And so especially, those of us who are faculty then went and got PhDs. And then we got onto the job market and realized that there was no guarantee that we would get an academic job, yet alone a tenure track job. And right now for me, I've been at my position for 4 years when, Cal Poly was unique because we switched from quarters to semesters the first year I was there. And then we switched from wanting to focus on in-person to wanting to focus to hybrid, and then COVID happened. And so I think we have a short time horizon because we know nothing's guaranteed in the longer time horizon. We don't have expectations that the things that people say will be there will actually be there. And it sounds kind of negative in this way, but it also means that you do what you can now to make sure that, if something changes, you're still able to roll with it.
Jerry.
Yeah, I think, these are excellent points that are being made. Of course, when I think of short time horizon, I think my age. That's not, but aside from that, the whole mentoring, everything that all the way that we were mentored as to what to do in an academic career has been said, tossed out on its head. People have all the advice to, what to do to get tenure doesn't mean much if there's no more tenure. And it's almost like the best approach would be, I guess, a spiritual, or at least how to deal with chaos or how to stay calm in the middle of chaos, which gets back to kind of a spiritual approach. Because as I remember this poster that once said, just when I thought I knew all the answers, they went and changed all the questions. And that's what's going on now. It's kind of like, how do you mentor somebody when you yourself don't know what's going on? I also think I got out at a good time. But right now, I agree with what Kathy, it's a mess out there, right? Nobody knows. And, especially for younger faculty, what are you supposed to, what do you do, Chantal? You have to, it's almost like you got to go minute by minute and be ready for a change at any time.
Jake.
Yeah, so I am a millennial, if you couldn't guess. And I like to say that I'm not the typical millennial, but in so many ways, some of the bad reps that the millennials get, it's me. And one of those things is, we're talking about this short mind frame. And instead of just sticking it out and doing what you have to do sometimes I don't like doing that. And again, it was either Jen or Brittany that said students like to know why. And I think that there are so many things as a junior faculty member that we have to worry about as we are chasing tenure. And then we are asked to do so many things that seem so meaningless and so important. I mean, so unimportant. Being on, and I don't, if one of you loves the strategic planning committee, hats off to you. I've been on it for 3 years, never want to be on it again, because we have spun our wheels and spun our wheels and spun our wheels and did everything and did everything again and did everything again. And nothing changed. And nobody's ever looked at this document and nothing matters, except the PRT team is going to come in and say, oh, your faculty looked at this. Yeah, sure. We wasted so much time doing it, and so to me, the why really does matter from the faculty, the junior faculty standpoint. So I don't know why I said all of that, but the short-term mind frame, I think not only is it happening, but if you're asking me, I think it's often justified. I think that short-term mind frame is often justified because sometimes there is no good why. You're just told to do these things, right? So there needs to be that good why.
I think it's funny because I remember for years we were teaching the students that things are changing and be ready to have change your career, and no one's going to have the same career, and you're going to be going through so many career changes, while all of us were comfortably sitting on tenure. And so we're telling them we're telling the students, you got to be ready for all this change, and we ourselves weren't really getting ready for it. But also to go along with what Jacob was saying, especially those people with AACS, who are in AACSB schools, who are being told to do all this stuff that's basically, in my mind, meaningless, like publishing the top tier journals, and it's got to be a top tier journal. If it's not a top tier journal, all that, none of which has anything to do with teaching. It raises, and yet every school wants to get AACSB accreditation for whatever reason. I mean, I think the point is almost as if you want to be a teacher right now, you better love teaching. And you better really love wanting to teach the students, because otherwise, it gets back, I guess, to what Jacob was saying, why else would you be doing it right now? And then be ready to put up with all kinds of, I know you're recording this, sorry, but get ready to put up with all kinds of stuff in between that gets in the middle of whatever it is that your main purpose is. If your main purpose is teaching, I mean, okay, I was on a bunch of university committees and everything else, and I like that stuff. But I think, you get very clear on what is the main goal that you have, and be ready to take that and go with it somewhere else if it doesn't work out where you are. Is this making any sense?
Yeah. Thank you. Kathy, I saw you put in the chat something that looks like you're going to play devil's advocate. And then Tom, I'll come to you next.
Oh, it was, Jen and I have actually already talked about this. We were on another session about, do you need passion for your career? And if I hear the word passion again, I might have to excuse myself. I take a very different approach. And I think passion when you're 20 is ridiculous. I think our students have so little experience. They don't know what that is. There's this enormous pressure to find your passion at the exclusion of everything else you can do. The great proportion of our students now are coming in with no work experience. So they have no framework by which to even know what they like or not like. So it's a TED talk that I put in the chat about a woman who says, stop searching for your passion, stop the madness. And she has some great stories about being fired and doing something just to make some money and finding out, wow, I'm great at this and I really like it. So the idea that passion and your engagement with it are bidirectional. And so I hate it when students are like coming to my office and they're immobilized with anxiety because they don't know what their passion is and they don't know how to find a job and they don't want to settle because everybody tells them, don't settle. And that I'm gonna glom onto Jerry and his language. That is just horseshit right there. They have to do something to get a framework. So I take a very different approach.
Oh,
I find myself, and it took a while for me to arrive at this, but I find myself being very reluctant to homogenize students, to put them in categories, or a category or a few categories. And the only way that I can address that is by recognizing the uniqueness of each student, and that takes conversation. That takes asking questions. That takes listening. And until I do that, I don't know whether a student or a junior faculty member or another faculty member, for that matter, any other faculty member, has something that I don't know about, or that could be valuable for me. And I have actually engaged in conversations with my students, with a student, or with a couple of students, and my curiosity has been strongly piqued to learn. I have to get to know, if when there are junior faculty, or faculty who have their own portfolio of experiences and knowledge and expertise. The only way I know what they have and can I learn from them is to treat them as an individual, to engage with them and talk with them.
Tom, thanks. Charles.
Make sure I'm not muted. It was interesting listening to the questions, and I don't have an answer, but it's for me, it brings up another question from a lot of you. It starts with Jim's question about the short-term time horizon of our students. And I'd be really interested in hearing the responses. Chantel, a lot of what you were saying is that you have a short-term time horizon because everything that was promised to you didn't come true as a generation. So therefore, you've been taught not to look that far into the future because every time the future arrives, it's different and it's usually disappointing. Is that, and again, I'm going to ask an overgeneralized question. I'm not sure it can be answered, but I know I had a brother who, if you would have given him $100 million today, he would have been completely, totally interested in what he could do with that money this afternoon and wouldn't think about tomorrow. So for me, I know, again, overgeneralization. Do we see this with our students being an uncertainty about the future, or are they sort of like how my brother was, where just by their own constitution, they are a live for today generation? And I know it's an overly broad, but listening to some of the answers, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Pat.
I just kind of wanted to make a comment. So like I'm working while I'm getting my doctorate, and so I feel like someone had mentioned, like, a lot of the students don't know what they want to be, and they feel like they might have to follow their passion, but they're not sure what their passion is. I guess as a teaching standpoint, I feel like maybe whatever you're teaching, share like your experience as maybe what you did, like what were part of your job duties when you were working, or what you expect for them to see, to try to help them anticipate if that's something that they want to do or not. And for the future, I feel like I'm a little optimistic now that COVID is almost over with. I feel like people are going to be wanting to go back in person and go to school. So hopefully more job opportunities will open up, but I'm still in school, so not sure yet.
I wonder too if we've, like, there's multiple issues that we're discussing in that I'm so struck as somebody who came out of a social sciences degree myself. I'm so struck by how business school students know what they want to do long term, right? To me, that's a sort of a long time horizon. And I'm generalizing, but my students know that they want to get their degree and then they want to get a job and they want to have a family. It's a very traditional approach compared to where I was coming from and where I see some of the more liberal arts students coming from who maybe don't know what they want to do and are focused on, the enriching their academic experience or taking a sort of more Renaissance perspective on education. So in that sense, there's a very long time horizon. And like, if I give my students a semester-long project, if it isn't broken down into very specific chunks, maybe by week, if not shorter, with very specific instructions and outcomes, it doesn't get done, or they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. I get a lot of questions about, well, how do I do this and what do I do? And so there's questions in there about needing structure and being able to maybe focus and chunk things for themselves, as opposed to having a long-term sense of what they want to do with their lives. And I know my experience as a faculty has been also very much going back and forth between having short and long time horizons. I'm going into my 6th year. And when I first showed up at my college and people said, don't be political because you want to wait till you have tenure until you're political. I thought, well, if I can't say what I think on political issues, that's not a good fit for me. I don't want to be here. And so in that sense, I had a short time horizon. But as I got closer to my tenure package going in, I suddenly thought, oh my gosh, maybe I do care about tenure. Maybe I should shut up for a little while. And maybe when the president comes to do his listening tour and comes to our department and asks for feedback, I shouldn't say anything. And so my time horizon shifted. Having just gotten laid off and had to find a new position, once again, my sense of what my goals are and what my time horizon is has changed. Let me throw out a second question for us to chew on for a few minutes, again, to get at the wisdom of junior faculty, and then we'll shift our conversation to the process of mentoring. Junior faculty, anyone in the room, can you explain to the more senior folks, what are your expectations around faculty-student relationships? What are the boundaries? Senior faculty might say something like, you seem to give out your cell phone numbers and offer to help with personal crises, chat about all kinds of issues during office hours or beyond. Like, what is the expectation you have around relationships, and what expectation should all faculty have around student-faculty relationships?
Take a first stab at that. I think when I think about faculty to student relationships, I think you do what is most comfortable for you and what's most authentic for you. So, some people are comfortable with giving out their cell phone numbers, that sort of thing. I might be pigeonholed, or, people might think that that's, something that I might be comfortable with. Personally, I'm not, so I don't do that. But I come up with other ways to connect with my students, via the one-on-one Zoom sessions or, email, that sort of thing. So I think that's what's the most important thing to do. First of all is, you'll have different expectations in your room too, in your classroom. Some students, how we all know how it is. A lot of them never show up for office hours, even if they're virtual. Some of them, they'll be at your office hours all the time. So it really varies as far as what their expectations are going to be. But I think if you try to be something that you're not, they're going to see through that right away. And then you're going to fail to build a relationship in the first place. And then I think, Jake, you raised your hand.
Yes, I did. So I am one that's more comfortable being a little more personal with students. You know, Sharon, you can create a Google number if you don't want to give out your actual cell phone number. It still rings on your phone. I mean, so I don't even do a Google number, because if it's going to ring on my phone anyway, then, you know, I just, if they want my cell phone, I give it to them. But I think what Brittany was just saying, it should be situational in terms of what the faculty member is comfortable with, because I will never name a name. There are some faculty colleagues of mine that you don't want trying to be personal with your students, because they are not personable individuals, right? I mean, they are just, look, they're academic, they're research oriented, and they're fantastic researchers. There is no possible way any student would ever benefit from trying to relate with these individuals. And I don't say that in a bad way, but you shouldn't have an expectation of all faculty members to have a relationship with those students, because those students are going to get, it's not even a diminishing return. They are going to like school less if they have that relationship than if that relationship never existed, right? I mean, let some of the researchers research, let some of the teachers teach, and let the ones that are, you know, more relatable be relatable. So it is, it's very situational in my opinion. We did something at Coastal, sorry, Jen.
No,
we did
go
something
ahead.
at Coastal where we forced mentorship. Do you know how weird that is? Like, hey stranger, I'm gonna be your mentor. Isn't it supposed to be more organic? Shouldn't you have students that you reach and they feel comfortable with you and you feel comfortable with them? It's very difficult to force those relationships, so they shouldn't be forced.
Brittany and Jake have really good comments here. I'll also add from my own experiences that, again, I think context really matters. So whether it's a small class or a large class lends itself, you know, to the extent that you're able to get to know your students in the classroom, and then that may translate to them wanting to talk with you further during office hours. I'd also add the content that you're teaching may also lend itself to students sharing and discussing and looking to you for advice on some personal matters. And also if you're teaching undergrads or graduate students. I do have some boundaries as well. I encourage students to come to meet with me during office hours, or if office hours don't work for you, to meet by appointment. I tend to work really late at night. And so if I'm up, I will respond to emails because I want to be as responsive as possible. That said, my boundaries come into place where I don't give them my cell phone. And I also will receive LinkedIn requests, but I do not accept the LinkedIn requests until after they graduate. Again, I think it's important that, you know, they're now joining my personal and professional network. And so I want to ensure that I've established a relationship with them where you know, if they're part of my network, I want to be able to speak to who they are in my network. So for what that's worth.
I'm just going to read a comment David made in the chat because he doesn't have a mic that's working. And then Pat, we'll come to you. David said, I try to model boundaries. I don't give my cell number. My sense is that giving them the idea that we as faculty are always on call does not serve them well in preparing for the professional world. I tell them that their manager is not going to sit at their computer, cell phone, waiting for their questions. Thanks. And Pat.
Yeah, I kind of what other people said, just preference on how you want to communicate, especially if like you're an introvert or extrovert type of person. But also in one of my classes, I had a professor who would require us to go to his office hours. And actually, I felt like that was very helpful because it kind of helped you build relationships with your, like, with the student and professor, but also like gave that opportunity where if you had any questions about what's going on in the syllabus or in class, like that, like it just kind of build a relationship to make them feel comfortable to come to you. So I thought like maybe requiring like one office hour session would be beneficial to the student. So
So we're having this awesome conversation because it's MLBTS. But these relationships can be hard to initiate, especially when you're a junior faculty and you feel you have something to share and offer. So we wanted to talk for a few minutes about how to initiate the process of reverse mentoring or mentoring up, and ask senior faculty what advice they would have for junior faculty about how to initiate, again, not a traditional mentoring relationship, but one that's more, it's got more parity, or where the junior faculty members' presence and insights are valued. And Jen, I wondered if you wanted to start with a question. Kathy will come to you for the first answer, and then again, we'll sort of go into free form from there.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. So I'm interested in learning more about how do we as junior faculty offer our expertise? Clearly, we have a different set of experiences. We surely haven't lived through all of the experiences that our senior faculty have in academia. Some of us may be closer to the Gen Z or part of the millennial generation. And so, you know, how can we offer expertise in a way that adds value to a relationship, that if we're reaching out to our senior faculties, it doesn't necessarily feel like we're asking for something, or that we're sort of saying, hey, we've got this and we know this and you don't, but, you know, really about creating that relationship and being able to offer something, feeling like we have something to offer. How do you recommend that we do that?
It's a great question, and the panelists have already seen my scree via email. I think in reflecting on that question, one of the ways that I would respond to that is to understand you absolutely bring something to the table, but it's reciprocity without equality. And I think the key is, if you're genuinely interested in what that other person is doing, everybody wants to think their work is interesting. And so it could be these really micro actions, but they're really meaningful. So finding an article that you've been reading on a particular topic that you know resonates with a senior person's research stream or their teaching topic or whatever it is, and just sending that along and saying, look, I read this. I know this is something that you're interested in. Have a great day. I was just thinking about you. And without strings attached, it's genuine. Like, if I'm sending an article to Jim Flynn, it's something that I think Jim Flynn is excited about. It's not something that I'm using to kind of suck up because it's moderately interesting, or it's more really all about me rather than Jim Flynn. And I don't know that anybody's ever been offended when it's genuinely serving them in some way. And a couple of the other examples were like going to a brown bag at your institution and responding to a question in a forum or with somebody personally, like they might have a question on a technology piece or some sort of workaround on a problem you've experienced. Saying, look, here's where I've had success with that issue. I'd be glad to talk with you a little bit more, and leave it at that. And I think just, again, the reciprocity without believing that you know all the stuff that they do, without assuming you know the backstory, assuming you know the politics or whatever. I don't know anybody that's ever reacted poorly to that. And that has served me well when I was in more of a junior role with people who have been extremely helpful in terms of mentoring for me.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up with what Kathy said, and I was listening to her response. And I teach the undergraduate capstone class, and for a number of years I got to teach a 200 level class. And I think many of us have had the experience, especially being in business schools, of students saying, well, I don't know why I have to take art history. I'm an accounting major, I'm a finance major. And I try to explain to them what a well-rounded individual is. And if you're an accounting major and you're a party, the last thing you want to do is walk up to a partner in an accounting firm and say, let's talk balance sheets and income statements. you've got to find something that's an authentic, and using, Kathy's language, it's an authentic connection. So, one of the reasons why this country is so mad about sports, you can talk about just about anybody about sports. We got the 5 or 6 things in society that we can talk about. So being authentic and making that connection. I know that speaking very well of a colleague that we hired in my department a couple of years ago, he's about as authentic can be. And he's found something just because of who he is to connect with each of us. And I think now he's really tired because now we all want to spend time and hang out with him. I think he's discovered too much. Great guy. But again, it was that authenticity. It was really that, and my department's geared towards that anyway. So I think it was a mutual reciprocity, to use Kathy's language. But he found something very early on in the process. It was a unique connection with almost everybody in the department. So authenticity and reciprocity. And it doesn't always have to be just on my research, but it's things that I find interesting as a person.
Well, the other piece of that too is multiple iterations. It can feel really, really awkward as a person seeking mentorship or seeking to share, building that relationship when it's like this one-off thing, because then it feels weird. And so finding ways to have these micro interactions, not like daily, but enough where you're thinking about that person and it's authentic, and just sharing things that you think are interesting for them. And then that grows. Then I think it becomes, I heard the word organic, because it is awkward when it's like, you will be having a mentoring relationship with this person. Like, that's so weird. But then it becomes more organic. And I have found that to be helpful.
And just coming back really quickly, interesting, the first question about the time horizon that started this whole conversation. Sometimes it just takes time. And again, coming back to at least, the senior faculty seeing a much shorter time horizon, I think the first part of the session and this part of the session presents some interesting conflicts. This is something that is built up over time.
Yeah, I was going to go back and reference what Tom said when you asked for the one word, and he gave us 3, which were relationship, process, and curiosity. I think that's what all of us have been talking about here and have been listening to. It's building just a relationship. It's having conversations that maybe the first 10 have nothing to do with anything where you're giving any advice or getting any advice. They're just conversations, but it builds up a reciprocity between us. And I was thinking earlier that conversation is a very big part of this. And maybe it's asking a question in such a way that if that opens up a conversation with that person, you wind up giving them some insights or some advice that maybe they need that they haven't thought about. For example, you could ask them, when did you first start using personal computers or whatever it is, just to sort of get an idea of their technological savvy and what it was like at that point for them to make a transition from typewriters to other thing. I have a very good friend who's a retired faculty member who's older than any of us in this group here. And he's never used his email address. He always used an electric typewriter. And when the return lever on his electric typewriter broke, rather than trying to use a keyboard, he went and got a wrench and attached that to the log or whatever it is on the typewriter, and would just pull that across when he was typing away. Nobody knew how quite to approach him and say, George, you can just use a keyboard to do this. So, it's just a matter of building things up and having that comfort level on both sides to do that. So,
Jerry.
I just finished watching on HBO Max this series with Gene Smart called Hacks, which is about the relationship between this older stand-up comedian and this 25-year-old who ends up helping her create a new act. And it's very interesting. It seems it's got some parallels to this discussion here. She's like in her almost 70, and the older one, and the younger one's like 25. And it's what it shows over the period of time, it really ends up being more of a personal relationship. It's like the more you develop and it takes, at least in the show, it takes like 8 episodes before they start off at each other's throat. And then over time, they get to see they have way more things in common than they thought they had. I don't know if anybody else has seen that show, but they begin to develop like this rapport with each other. And at the same time, she tends to be very, she gets angry and puts stuff out there, and the other person finds, and so it's like finding a way to get balance with each other. The other thing that I wanted to mention that I think is important is the politics that might be involved, because there are cases where a senior faculty, for whatever reason, might look like they want to be helpful, but it turns out they're not helpful because they see you as a threat. That's happened, and you have to kind of go through the. I see a couple of people shaking their heads. So I mean, it's very interesting. Senior faculty seeing the younger faculty as a threat or somehow coming on to them or being suspicious if you try to make a suggestion. And it seems to me the only way around it is to develop a personal, get to know each other first. Because otherwise saying, well, even what Kathy was saying, but here's an article you might find interesting. The senior faculty might go, why are they showing me this? But I mean, they could be suspicious of pretty much anything. And it just takes a while to begin to develop a relationship.
I can't even tell you how much what Jerry just said is maybe the key takeaway. I mean, if you think about from your own perspective, are you the type of person that people have to earn your trust before you give it, or do you give it until you receive data that they haven't earned? You know what I mean? Like, how are you with trust? And I have gotten people, Charles has heard this ad nauseum. There was an extremely political player in my institution who I was not prepared for her. And to Jerry's point, there was this, it was very damaging, and I didn't see it. And I didn't take the time and really listen to the things that she was doing until it was too late. And so thanks for mentioning that, Jerry. I think that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, I'll give an example. There was this one woman, when I first started teaching, she would go out of her way to try, if she looked like she's being really helpful to the younger faculty. How are you doing? Tell me what's happened. And then it turns out she's spreading gossip all around the around the university, making up stories, and just really ending up hurting you. And meanwhile, I think Kathy at one conference once said that I always do a lot of self-disclosures. I mean, I tend to trust everybody. So I'm telling her all this personal stuff, and she's, using it all against me. So you really have to be careful. And that's why it's important to really develop a relationship.
Tom?
There are things that I'm curious about that I know how to handle, that satisfy that curiosity. There are things that I'm curious about that I don't know how to do. And I will search out someone for that, regardless of whether it's somebody 40 years younger, 50 years younger than I am. I'm 81. There are people who are a lot younger than I am who know a lot more about things that I want to learn about, and things that I don't know I want to learn about. And the only way that I can, when I know that there's an area that I don't know enough about, that I would like to know about, I have some way of going about finding somebody or somebody who know more about it than I do, regardless of whether it's a person who is roughly in my age category or someone who is much younger than I. But sometimes I come across in doing the things that I like to do, I come across a challenge that I'm not sure how to deal with. and I can look around for somebody, and it doesn't matter how old they are. It doesn't matter the age difference. If they know more than I know about it, then I'm open to learning from that person. And there are some things that I don't know that I really don't want to know about. And somebody else may know, some younger faculty may know a lot about that, but until I see a reason to learn about it, I'm not willing to put my time into it. I know that I am not a strong quantitative research methods person. I'm very qualitative oriented. I also tend to have a very long time horizon, a very big picture approach to things. And so when I see the interconnections of so many different things, and if somebody can add to that, that's great.
Kathy, I see your hand. I also know Brittany has a question we could come to about power imbalances. And Kelly, you've put a really interesting question in the chat about also about, in many ways, power imbalance, right? Especially in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Kathy, I don't know if we could get at some of these questions about power and then come to you and you
Absolutely.
could weave that
Yeah,
in.
yeah. No, we're done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't we do that for about 5 minutes and then we'll move to a wrap-up conversation. Kelly, do you want to state what you put in the chat?
Sure. I've just been listening to everybody mostly talk about building relationships and kind of putting the impetus on the junior faculty to build relationships with senior faculty, and but vice versa, and that these mentoring relationships work better after you have trust. I just feel like I worry because faculty of color might be left out of those relationships. We all know that, research shows people are going to mentor people who are similar to them. And if I was, so I'm in the middle, which is why I haven't talked much because I don't feel like junior faculty or senior faculty, but I feel like if I were going to ask somebody for help, it would probably be somebody who was similar to me that I have a relationship with. And therefore, junior faculty of color might feel left out of that. And that's where I think formal mentoring, several people have talked about the awkwardness of formal mentoring both ways, but that's where formal mentoring could help if we could figure out a way to build those relationships, to find some formal way, but also relationship building way so that everybody can be involved. Because I want junior faculty who have different backgrounds to also benefit from or be respected in this way or asked for help in their expertise. But I suspect that in many of our institutions that wouldn't happen in the way that we've been discussing. So what are y'all, I don't know the answer. This is what has worried me as we've been talking.
Brittany, do you want to talk about power or should we leave that for a sec?
I actually want to leave that for a sec
Okay.
because Kelly's question really resonated with me, making me think about, I know I'm not faculty of color, but as a woman, I've been searching for mentorship in female faculty, and especially, considering my future, and what I want, women that are mothers, that have families. And just a quick anecdote, I reached out to somebody that was a more senior faculty person, and I received advice to wait to have children until I got tenure. And I appreciate it because that was probably the advice at the time that she was coming through, starting her career and that sort of thing. But if I waited till tenure, I don't know, if that would even be biologically possible. But so I just wanted to share that because it really, really resonated with me. So I'd love to talk about that more.
So I think
I was putting it in Sorry, Chantel. Go ahead.
No, you can go. It's fine.
I was putting it in the chat, but it's easier to say. So my institution does two things to respond to what Kelly's saying. Every new faculty person or junior faculty person gets a formal mentor, a peer faculty mentor from this pool of volunteers. And they try to be very intentional about being present to differences in age and or gender orientation, gender identity, people of color, socioeconomic status, things like that, where people, if they feel comfortable disclosing those things, like I would like this in a mentor, then they can match that up. And we have programming and a little bit of financial support for like coffee and lunch or whatever for a year. And then if you don't want to continue that, you don't have to continue that. And that's really nice. And then we have these informal, they're like circles where you get together for informal conversations around topics. And it's episodic. It's from our teaching and learning center. But I know lots of organic kinds of relationships have sprung from those. I think it's a matter of putting people together in ways that you can share expertise and share interests. And it's in some ways a game of numbers, but also that formal thing can allow it to grow or not if it doesn't work. So I agree with you. I think we need both.
Chantal?
Yeah, so I was going to say something similar. I mean, we at my school have the formal mentoring program, but mentorship quality is hit or miss, right? When people are kind of being voluntold into those positions. What I have found works is, and I mean, again, not a person of color, but we have affinity groups. And so you have some of our like leaders who come and kind of do panel mentorship. And then there's chances to network at those affinity groups to build up mentorship. And I found those have been a lot more helpful in connecting me with people outside of my department, which gets outside of that politics. And so I found that helpful for talking and finding mentors. But also, right, the research shows that really it's sometimes the white male mentor, like even if you're a woman or a person of color, having a white male mentor has stronger career impacts, which is sad because they can, but I mean, it's research points to they're more likely to be able to be a sponsor as well as a mentor, and those things are really important for career outcomes. So I don't know if I have a solution here. I just wanted to point out some of the research.
There's an awesome a TED-like talk, maybe you've seen it, by the former dean of Columbia Business School, who is a Black woman who's recently passed away. And her research was all on diversity. And her talk is about valuing diversity in teams. But one of her takeaways to students is next time you are networking, chit-chatting, whatever you want to call it, don't try and find a similarity with the person you're talking to, which is our go-to standard. Try and figure out how you're different. And as you figure out your differences, you figure out how much you have to learn from each other. And her research talks about the implications of this for teams. But it's making me think it's such a powerful message for mentoring too, in that, is there a way that if I wanted to find someone to mentor, could reach out across difference, and vice versa. If I'm looking for a senior mentor, the research Chantal cited aside, can I make sure that I'm thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and reaching across difference, and valuing, all forms of expertise? I don't have the mental capacity to find the talk right now, but I can throw it into our list of resources afterwards.
Yeah, I think there's some sort of, I don't know, I feel like there's some sort of need for the people, the senior faculty, to reach out to junior faculty who are both women and people of color and ask for this reverse mentoring, both to mentor them, but also to ask. I just feel like Brittany was saying also, like as a woman in a predominantly male department, I'm less likely to go up and say, hey, I have this expertise. I think you might be able to, even if we have a good informal relationship, I'm still not likely to act like I know something that they don't. And even with women, I see one of the comments here about women to women. So there's still that power thing going on too. But I don't know. I feel like it's the senior in this reverse mentoring world that we're talking about. There's some emphasis on the senior faculty to say, I would like this to happen. It's safer that way for the junior faculty, for the senior faculty to say, I would love your expertise. I see you're an expertise in this. Do you have any articles about that? Or I see you're an expertise. I've seen you do this. Can you teach me how you do it? I think that's the safest way in this kind of political world. I don't know.
Jerry?
I think that, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that one thing is that the skill set is way more important than the person's gender, gender, race, or anything else, I think, which is what we're hearing. If a person has a certain set of skills and can teach the other person, it can be really helpful. The other thing, unfortunately, at least years ago, I don't know if it's still true, is that in a place where there's largely males and there's only one or two women, at least I've seen it happen, the senior woman looks at the younger woman as a real threat. Like it was hard for me to get here, and I don't want anybody else to get. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that or if it's changed any. I see Kelly shaking her head. So I mean, this is why, you can't just assume that because somebody's the same race, the same gender, that they're automatically going to be an ally. You're better off looking for somebody that has a certain set of skills that you might be able to use. And oftentimes it's helpful to have somebody with different skills so you can, each help each other.
Jerry, I was just listening to your speaking and I couldn't help in the last couple of minutes thinking especially about affect. And again, I'm a strategy person, so I'm using words that are somewhat unfamiliar to me. But for those of you who are longtime participants in this conference, I kept coming back to Andre Delbecq. And you got anywhere within 20 feet of Andre, and you felt this warm, welcoming presence who was genuinely curious to know about you, who you were, what you were doing. And in so many ways, that's the spirit of this conference. But, coming back to what Jerry was saying, so some of the things we're talking about are structural, but I just come back to, I cannot tell you how many times I was around Andre, and all of a sudden I found out that I was in this conversation where I was getting, not even specifically, because Andre wasn't the kind of person, here's guidance for you, but just asking questions. So I think there's, no matter who you are, Andre's example of just by his presence in the room, and if you knew Andre's story, it was a long journey to the Andre that those of us who knew him in his last 10, 12, 15, 20 years. But it's part of just, again, that affect that we send out consciously or unconsciously, that we're open to this, both as a mentor and as a mentee.
Hi, I would just like to add, as a Black woman faculty member, that I'm open to anyone that's willing to serve as a mentor. I think that in my experience in different, departments I work for, I have been the only Black woman. So for me to seek someone that's, like me, it was very difficult, but there were mentors who did not look like me, who were very supportive, and I built relationships with, and they guided me and they supported me and they provided valuable advice and information. It's great to have someone, and that may, that you resonate with, that you can relate to. But it's also good to be open-minded and to build those relationships for someone who's just willing to serve as a mentor and guide you in the process and be there for you. So You know, what everyone's saying is definitely I agree with, but from my experience, being the only one, usually I don't have, you know, someone that's like me. So I accept anyone that's willing to mentor and help me.
Yeah, thanks for that. I also, you know, I don't think that I was even suggesting necessarily that people have to be the same demographics to be mentored. It's just that people sometimes get left out of the mentoring relationships because you don't think about it. It's much more common that people mentor people who are similar to them. So we have to consciously, you know, reach out to other people sometimes. Or sometimes do some of these formal things that can build relationships, get people to know each other who might not otherwise just meet and know each other. So,
Deanna, have you found that you are asked often to mentor either women or Black women academics? And does that request come too much?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
And how do you feel about that? What's your response?
I mean, I just, you know, it's the students. I'm a professor. I love to teach. This is what I do. So I just accept it and just know that that's part of the calling. For me, I've accepted it. That's part of the calling. The students are going to come, the faculty, I'm going to be assigned students that, you know, are African-American or definitely probably women as well. And I've accepted it because it happens all the time. So it's not, you know, it's not one of those things where I've said I can't do this because I can. I mean, this is my calling. This is part of the job, I guess I would say. And so, but it's going to happen. It happens to most faculty member of color for, you know, various reasons. But so yes, it happens. I've accepted it. And I'm usually the one that has the students that, you know, meet that demographic.
but also people who are, you know, making decisions should recognize that, right? And people who are doing that extra service work should get some sort of either recognition or pay or some other release. But I mean, I think that's true because I do diversity and inclusion work, and I reach out to my Black students, but they don't want to talk to me. They still go to my Black female colleague, which I understand completely, but we should recognize her extra work, right?
Yes.
And
it would be nice, but I mean, it's not to be expected, but yeah, you know,
but
it
even
would be
faculty
nice,
even faculty to faculty, you know, like there's that same thing happens with a few Black faculty. They are mentoring all the incoming Black faculty informally, but it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work. And as faculty, we know it's always more work on top of work, you know, everything that we do. I'm at the point, I just accept it. I just know that this is part of the job and this is part of my role as a professor. And even if I spoke up, I don't think anything changes. It's not going to change. So I just have an optimistic personality about it and perspective of it, and just I accept it. I mean, that's all I can do.
I don't know if everyone can see the chat, but Kathy's posted in the chat that her university has now recognized the work that people of color do in promotion and tenure guidelines to make it visible.
We have recognizing, finally, it took us years to do it, but the work that you're talking about, Deanna, you should absolutely be recognized for that. It's disproportionate. It's often emotional labor, and it's invisible.
Yes.
And so we've included our P&T guidelines are very broadly based around allowing candidates to make their own case. I really actually like our P&T guidelines and our process very much, and have served on our P&T committee for many years. And we got our faculty to vote it in, where that type of work, making a statement about, I have this number of students and I took the student to the airport, or whatever that is, all of that invisible infrastructure and mentoring and support that BIPOC do is included in our statements. And it should be, and it absolutely should be. And I appreciate that you have built that into your mental model about your work. It should not be as disproportionate as it is. And so I would encourage you to find a way to influence, because it can be done and it should be done.
I agree. And I mean, I do highlight in my evaluations, and I bring it to my associate dean's attention. But other than that, it's just, it's just my daily workload, I guess. But thank you for that recommendation, Kathy. I appreciate it.
There's never any good way to close an excellent conversation. We had planned to spend the last 20 minutes talking about next steps. If there's anything that we think MOBTS or TC should be doing more formally around mentoring. I just decided we have a really short survey. I'm going to put the survey link in the chat here. If people wouldn't mind taking their last minute to fill it out. It's 3 really short questions. And one is, do you think that MOBTS should have a more formal something or other around mentoring? And I don't know if those of you who are participating wouldn't mind putting your emails in the chat, maybe we could follow up with you one-on-one to ask if you think that MOBTS should be doing something more formal, if you'd be willing to do that. I don't know, other panelists, what do you think?
Sounds good to me.
I think the ongoing theme of mentoring, the relational process of mentoring, is always a good topic to explore from different perspectives. I have been enlightened by a number of the comments and the perspectives of the people who are here on the screen in front of us. Mentoring, whichever direction it goes, can be based on interest. It can be based on need. It can be based on personality congruence. It could be based on political and power issues. There are, and so now I know we started out this with mentoring upside down from junior faculty to senior faculty, but a mentoring relationship, a mentoring process can go in any direction at any time among any 2 people.
I don't think there's any better way to end than that, Tom. That was perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us. I do feel like we've just scratched the surface, right? We're just getting into the nitty gritty and the weeds, and I'm sure everybody has another thing they could add. And maybe we'll be able to do that next year or in some way offline. So thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you,
Yes,
Sarah.
thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.